Thanks for joining me for this edition of the Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM The Word. I'm Roberta Foster, and today I welcome Ray Moore. His signature on the book is E. Ray Moore. We welcome him back to Author's Corner. He has written the book, The Promise of Jonadab, Building a Christian Family Legacy in a Time of Cultural Decline, and he'll tell you more about how to find the book at the end of the program. Here's a little bit about Ray. He has served for 50 years in pastoral ministry as a campus pastor, a congregational minister, an army chaplain, or director of a Christian ministry. He's passionate about reaching Christian parents with the message of K-12 Christian education and homeschooling, and he currently serves as president of Frontline Ministries, which focuses on prayer, revival, and K-12 Christian education and homeschooling. And he's also been involved with the film released called Escaping Common Core, and another one that he'll tell you about in our conversation. Ray, thanks for joining me on Author's Corner.
Thank you, Roberta. And again, I want to reiterate how it's good to see a Christian program to talk about authors. There's a lot of good Christian books being written that really help grow the Christian church and families, and we need more people like you that would take up this as a topic.
Well, first, why don't you introduce our listeners to who Jonadab is and how that spurred you into writing the book?
Well, let me say, first of all, my wife and I did it as a couple, and she's a professional wordsmith, works for the state of South Carolina legislature as a writer, and so she did the editing and wrote half the chapters. Okay. I wrote half of them. Basically an argument or a message that I had been given for quite a few years before we wrote the book. Jonadab is a very obscure Old Testament character. He only shows up in two chapters, 2 Kings 10 and Jeremiah 35. And in 2 Kings 10, he's the only personality that's mentioned as a helper to King Jehu, who was the king that followed Ahab and purged Baalism out of Israel. So he was a reformer king, and Jonadab was his helper. And you may remember the scene in 2 Kings 10 where Jehu is riding the chariot, and he sees a man walking on the road, and he reaches and says, "Are you with me on this project?" And he lifts him and takes him into the chariot, and they ride off together to fight the Baalism. And then he disappears, Jonadab disappears, and he shows up again 250 years later in Jeremiah 35. Of course, he's been long dead, but his descendants are still carrying on in the traditions and the things that he commanded them on how to be a godly family. And I didn't even find this story out till it's probably been 25 years now, and I've got 2 seminary degrees, and I'd been in pastoral work, and I kind of knew about him, but I hadn't put the pieces together. Mm-hmm. What makes the story so exciting is connecting 2 Kings 10 with Jeremiah 35, and when you do that, it just explodes in beauty about this man, Jonadab. So anyway, we maybe can stop at that point, and if people want to see my wife and I talking about it, we have a 6-minute, it's kind of an ad or an interview on our webpage at exodusmandate.org, exodusmandate.org. Okay. And it's the second item at the top of our webpage, and they can go and see me and my wife, Gail, talking about this character and what he did and what he means. And then they can order the book if they would like. It's called The Promise of Jonadab.
All right. So the first chapter in your book is called The Greatest Dad in the Bible. And so along with telling us more about Jonadab, tell us why fathers are so important in having a Christian home and leading in the role of educator.
Yeah, this book is a good gift, Christmas gift or Father's Day gift for a young dad. It's good for an older person as well, but particularly families that have small children, say teenagers down, because you could still influence them if you're instructing them in the ways of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So we created it for young families. We've been married 56 years, my wife Gail and I, and we have 4 adult children and 9 grandkids. And this book is really a kind of a mixture of the principles that we use in raising our children, and also intermingled with the story of Jonadab. What we found is that we were following the model that he had in the Bible, and then so when we discovered him, we sort of mixed his story in with our story. And so it's basically, we call him the greatest dad in the Bible because he had such great success. In 2 Kings 10, he shows up, and then in Jeremiah 35, the whole chapter is devoted to his descendants. And Jeremiah puts a test before them. He says, come into the temple and drink wine. Of course, they did not drink because their father Jonadab told them not to. And so he put a test before them, and they declined. And then the promise of Jonadab is in Jeremiah 35:19, where Jeremiah says, Jonadab, because of the obedience and faithful of his children, 250 years later, Jeremiah puts a blessing on them and says, Jonadab, the son of Rechab, will not lack a man to stand before me forever. Which means in some ways it's hard for us to understand that there's, in perpetuity through time, all of time, even today, there's a godly line from that family existing somewhere in the world today. And when my wife and I saw that, it just sort of exploded for us, and we say it's our life message. We say he's come to live with us.
Amen.
So I talk about this a lot, and we wrote a book on it, and it's been translated into Mandarin. It was selling well in China for a few years. Right now, because the church in China is undergoing so much persecution, I believe they shut down Christian publishers. But it was doing better in China in Mandarin than in American English. And then I've gotten it translated into Spanish, but not yet published.
Okay.
And I'm working on a book in Poland.
Wow.
So we're trying to get it around the world, but it's slow going.
Well, today I'm talking with Ray Moore regarding his book, The Promise of Jonadab, which is available for you as he has shared. You are listening to Author's Corner, and I'm Roberta Foster. So in the book, you also include numerous stories about families from around the world. And is that kind of what you were explaining with the translations, or something totally separate?
No, it's very connected. We're talking about a multi-generational legacy in a Christian family. And most of us think about maybe raising our children for Christ, but we don't think beyond that. But we think you could teach things in the family that it would pass down through the generations. And I have one example. I have a good friend that's from Alexandria, Egypt, and he's a son of a Presbyterian minister. He actually lives here now in America. And he's a Coptic Christian. If you know the history of the Coptic Christians, they were all Presbyterians or brethren. And there's a big Protestant church in Egypt, 500,000 Presbyterians. And, raising a Christian family. And he says they can trace their godly heritage in his family back to the 13th century. They can trace it back by name, and then the records are lost in the 13th century, but they believe that they go back to the apostolic era, the first century.
Okay, so in the interview that we had broadcast last week, you were talking about Christian education and the importance of getting children out of public school.
Right.
How does your book about the Promise of Jonadab reiterate that?
Well, we give that in the book, and we give maybe 6 or 8 things that you can do as a family that would, I can't say guarantee, but would make it very likely that your children would continue on in the Christian faith. And we think homeschooling or Christian schooling would be one of those. And, of course, we believe in family worship. We practiced that with our children when they were small. It wasn't long because their attention span was not long, but we would sing a song or two, quote some scripture, read a story, and then pray. And so you do that. You have family worship. We practice discipline, and so it's important you discipline your children and correct them. We have that all. That's all integrated in the book. But Christian schooling and homeschooling will be one of the things that you should do if you want to guarantee a Christian legacy.
Additionally, you have been involved in a film called Educated for Liberty. And so with just a minute or two left, tell our listeners about the content of that and how they have access to it.
It's the number one item at the top of my webpage at exodusmandate.org. They can go there and click on it and watch it from my webpage. And it's educatedforliberty.com. And it's a free online movie right now, only been out 6 weeks, and we hope and have a plan to try to get 10 million views in the next year. So we hope your audience will check it out. It is a little long, but they can watch it in 6 segments of 20 minutes apiece, or they could look at half of it, but it is an hour and 40 minutes long, but it's worth it, and it's comprehensive. And our argument that we make is that we founded the American nation on the back of homeschooling and campus Christian schools, not public education. And if we're going to renew and invigorate and re-energize our American experiment, we must go back to the original model of Christian schooling and homeschooling, which was also the biblical model.
Alrighty, so today I've been talking with Ray Moore regarding the book, The Promise of Jonadab, Building a Christian Family Legacy in a Time of Cultural Decline. And I certainly appreciate your time with us today, Ray.
Thank you, Roberta, and kudos to you again for taking this approach with your audience.
And to our listeners, if you missed any part of today's interview or would like to hear it again, or his book, Let My Children Go, that was broadcast last week, you can now find it on your favorite podcast platform or through kneo.org. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Roberta Foster on the Author's Corner. Join me again next time.